Good morning, class. Thank you all for coming in quietly and completing your bell ringers. Today we're going to talk about multiplying integers. Now, it is very similar to adding integers. Can anyone tell me the rules of adding integers? Can anyone? Jasmine, can you tell me?
The sum of two positive integers is a positive,
Yes.
and any integer and its opposite is a zero.
Very good. What Jasmine said was a number and its opposite equals zero, which would means, for example, the numbers 2, -2 plus 2 equals 0. Now, today we're going to focus on multiplying integers, and they have three rules as well. The first rule, which is rule number 1, it is a negative times a positive equals a negative. And an example of this would be -3 times 2 would equal -6. Rule number 2 for multiplying integers would be a negative times another negative equals positive. And an example of this rule would be -5 times -5 would equal a positive 25. And the last rule number 3, is a positive times a positive equals a positive as well. An example of this would be 7 times 2 equaling 14. Now, Jasmine, do you see a pattern that goes in our rules?
Yes.
Yes. Could you give me an example of a problem for rule number 2?
Rule number 2. A -2 times a -4 equals +8.
Very good. Okay, I'm going to draw a chart for you, and I want you to give me the answer and the rule for the problem. Okay?
Okay.
Problem number 1 would be -1 times -6. What would the answer be?
6.
6. And what rule is this problem applying?
Rule number 2.
Rule number 2. And what does rule number 2 say?
A negative times a negative is a positive.
Very good. Okay, we're going to do another problem. We're going to try -5 times 5.
25.
25. Go back to our rules. Let's look at rule number 1 again. Could you read the rule for me, Jasmine?
Negative times a positive equals a negative.
Okay, so here we have a -5 multiplied by a +5. So what would be the answer for that?
A -25.
-25. Very good. And what rule was that?
Rule number 1.
Rule number 1. One last problem. We're going to try +2 times +3.
6.
6. Very good. And what rule is being applied to this problem?
Rule number 3.
Rule number 3. Very good. Okay, so just to go back over, do a quick review. Jasmine, in your own words, can you tell me the 3 rules for multiplying integers?
Okay, rule number 1 is a negative number times a positive number is a negative number.
Okay.
And rule number 2 is a negative number times a negative number is a positive number.
Very good.
And rule number 3 is a positive number times a positive number equals a positive number.
Very good. Okay, what I would like for you to do is take out your dry erase boards, and we're going to do a little fun activity. And once you have your dry erase boards, please let me know. Okay, you ready? Okay, here's what I want you guys to do. I have written down 5 math problems, and I want you to write down the answer and what rule that it uses. When you're finished, turn your paper over and let me know. So the first problem is 4 times negative 4. Okay, could you please show me your answers? 4 times negative 4 equals negative 8 using rule 1. Let's try that again. You have the rule portion correct, but the mathematics portion is not. Let's try that again, please. Okay, negative 16 is the correct answer, and it also uses rule number 1. Okay, let's look at the second problem. Our second problem is 10 times 5. 10 times 5. And what rule would this problem use? Good job. The answer is 50, and it does use rule number 3. Okay? Okay, the next multiplication problem is negative 11 times 12. Negative 11 times 12. And once you're finished, please say the answer out loud.
Negative 11 times 12 equals negative 132, and it's rule number 1.
Let's see. Very good. Good job. The next problem is negative 15 times a negative 2. Negative 15 times a negative 2.
The answer is positive 30, and it's rule number 2.
Let's check and see if we're correct. Good job. You're on a roll today. The last problem is negative 10 times 10. Negative 10 times 10.
Right. The answer is negative 100, and it's rule number 1.
Let's check and see. Very good. Alright, let's go back and review one more time. What I want you to do is, I want you to give me the difference between the addition rule and the multiplication rule. And I want you to give me an example of that.
The difference between the addition rule and the multiplication rule is that in addition, a negative plus a negative is equal to a negative. And in the multiplication rule, a negative times a negative equals a positive.
Okay, could you give me an example of the addition rule?
An example of the addition rule would be negative 6 times negative 3 plus negative 3 equals positive 9. Wait, equals negative 9.
Negative 9, good job. Now give me an example of the multiplication rule.
The multiplication rule, it would be negative 6 times negative 3 equals a positive 18.
Positive 18. Very good. Alrighty, we're just going to review one last time before I break you up individually so you can complete your assignment. What were the 3 rules that we learned about today?
Rule number 1
Mm-hmm.
is that a negative number times a positive number is a negative number.
Okay. And could you give me an example?
Negative 2
Mm-hmm.
times positive 10
Times a positive 10. Okay.
equals negative 20.
Negative 20. Good job. Okay, what was the next rule we learned about?
Rule number 2 is a negative number times a negative number equals a positive number.
And give me an example of this.
An example would be negative 4 times negative 3 equals 12.
Equals 12. And what was the last rule we discussed?
The last rule, number 3, is a positive number times a positive number equals a positive number.
And what would be an example of this?
An example would be 7 times 3 equals 21.
Equals 21. Very good. Okay, I will be handing out the worksheet that I need for everyone to complete. This needs to be completed individually. No cheating, no talking to your neighbors. And once you are done, please put it in the right tray and you will be free to go. Thank you.